Hi guys, I'm Dana Al-Hanbali and this is Something to Consider. Fashion, clothing, jewelry, the things we wear, what do they really do? We talk about fashion as an expression, as art, as industry, but rarely do we pause to ask what happens psychologically when someone steps into a garment and suddenly stands taller. Is it confidence? Is it performance? Or is it permission? Because sometimes a dress isn't just fabric. Sometimes it's armor. Sometimes it's ceremony. Sometimes it's identity made visible. As a Palestinian designer working in luxury couture, his presence alone carries narrative. His work often appears at moments when identity feels heightened, and he belongs to a generation reshaping what Arab design looks like on a global stage. This conversation isn't about collections. My guest today, Zaid Farouki, is a designer whose work moves between power and softness, tradition and modernity. His pieces are worn at weddings, on red carpets, appear on the covers of magazines, and at milestone moments. Moments when who we are and how we're seen feel especially intertwined. Today's conversation is about the psychology of dressing power and what it means for a man to interpret femininity and masculinity, and about how heritage, particularly Palestinian heritage, can quietly shape the lens through which we create and express ourselves. Because sometimes what we wear says more about what we're carrying than what we're showing. Zaid, welcome to the show and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Dana.
I want to start off by taking out my little Zaid Farouki sachet and my first purchase from Zaid Farouki. Actually, it was a gift, funny enough. We actually met when you gave me this. I love it. It's my batikha pin. What was the inspiration behind making these pins? Everyone wears them.
Interestingly enough, we actually, I started creating them for myself. So at the beginning of the genocide, I wanted to wear something that was representative of my identity everywhere and anywhere possible. And I didn't want to retail them. I thought it was something that was done for me, and I didn't want them to be in any way commercialized of any sort. And they're completely handmade in the studio. The team and I discussed it, and we went to the embroiderer and we're like, can you actually create something for me? And then I remember I was flying out in December, and my direct family had asked me to create for each of them. And then I had a friend of mine that asked me to create for her, and I was just passing them around. And then it evolved into something bigger because my identity was always worn on my sleeve, even before everything that happened 3 years ago. And I think up until today, if you were to look at me and pass by me on the street, I either am wearing the heart or wearing the batikha. Like, it's just become part of my daily garb where I wake up, it's actually on me.
Almost like quiet representation.
Quiet representation, exactly.
I love that. And you have kind of a layered look now. I've seen that you've added more pins to the collection.
We have.
Can you talk us through them?
Of course. So the ahwa, the coffee cup, is super important, especially in the region, because it represents hospitality. And then it is very, I think, the look of it and the design of it is also something that's passed through the whole entire region, whether it's from the Sham region to the Gulf to certain parts of North Africa. You have the same exact design.
So true. It's like an iconic standard design.
Exactly. So that's something of a representation, and also it shows how much of how hospitable we are as individuals. And then you have the tarbush, which actually has a hidden batikha inside of it.
Oh, okay.
So on the tassel. So looking back historically at old family photographs, especially in the Ottoman era, a lot of our family members would wear the tarbush on a daily, and it became kind of a masculine headgear. And I love might not be the right context, but how it traveled through the Ottoman Empire. Then the origins being from North Africa, eventually adopted in courts in Istanbul and all throughout the Ottoman Empire, eventually taking it back to the Arab world where men would be in tailored suitings, but tarbush, and a man would never leave the house without his tarbush. And then you have the Yafa orange.
Of course.
And then you have the interpretation of the heart, which is a batikha.
I love that because I feel like also for you, your work is everywhere. And I think that's what's incredible about your brand. We know you through your work. But what I'd love to do is delve a little bit deeper to kind of the inspiration behind the work and the man behind the work. So I want to start with an opening question. What part of your story drives you in a way that most people don't see?
I think a lot of people get to see the Arab identity of it, and I would say the regional identity of it, being from the Swana region, I would say, which is, if you're not familiar with the term, it's actually the more woke version of MENA.
Okay. Good
so
to know.
It's Southwest Asia, North Africa.
The decolonized definition.
Exactly.
Or term.
So it's such a strong identity of mine. Another thing that we also look at is the masculine and feminine identity in the region. What interpretation of that kind of we've adopted from the West, and what is the masculine and the feminine according to regional standards, I would say, especially in garb and in outfits. And a lot of it is mostly family. The amount of research that I go through to actually go through family identity and historical photographs where I'm inspired by, that's also one of our major things that we're heavily inspired by.
In that case, I want to take a step back because I remember one of my first conversations with you were over a series of photographs that you actually found for your family, I believe some of which included your grandmother. Can you talk to us about your past? Where are you originally from? Where's the Farouki family from?
So the Faroukis are actually from the city called Ramle in Palestine, ethnically cleansed in 48. Maternal side is from Jerusalem. And so eventually, pre-48, both of them were kind of very much in prominent, I would say, in their societal political spheres. And then eventually 48 made their way to Egypt. So they sought refuge in Egypt.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's like, you know how us Palestinians, we have like, oh, the Palestinians that ended up in Egypt, Palestinians that ended up in Jordan or Lebanon
or Kuwait
or Syria or the Gulf. Each one, we have these subcategories of us, how we ended up. So we eventually ended up in Egypt, and whoever, I would say the whole family was educated in Egypt between the 50s to the early 70s, depending upon that, and then eventually moved to Saudi. So my grandparents ended up in Egypt, and then my paternal grandfather ended up in Saudi in the 50s. My maternal grandfather ended up in Saudi in the 60s. Father was born in Egypt. My mother was born in Saudi, and they've been in Saudi ever since.
Interesting.
So we're third generation, but also Jordanian passport. So I was raised in Jordan. I would say Jordan played a very big part in our upbringing. But also it's just, so I'm a blend of this region from wherever it is.
Yeah, it's funny because I feel like Palestinians in general that live in exile kind of become an amalgamation of all of the places that they've been. How much of that actually has influenced your work, though?
A lot.
Really?
A lot. Because
talk to me more.
A lot of it plays on the role of how proud we are as a family of being from from this region, and how it's affected all of us. There's the good and the bad. No one leaves their homeland forcefully, happily, but like also how they've managed to survive and how they've managed to actually build a future, find stability in the region. It's recreating yourself no matter what. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's no matter what happens, you're recreating yourself with the cards that you've been dealt. And still, this region hugs you no matter what.
Talk to me about the influence of women in your life. The women that raised you, the women that have loved you. I know that they played a major part in the work that you're doing.
Interesting. I would actually say if it wasn't for powerful women in my life, and I would say across the board, whether it is from my cousins to my mom to my grandparents to my aunts to every single one. I think if it wasn't for the woman, a strong woman holding down the household and the fort, and teaching us about our identity in the household, in the diaspora, while the men went out to find what we would call quote unquote stability. So if we were to look at like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is like roof, food, even to a certain point, which is identity. So a lot of us sought out passports or proof of ID and all of that. If the men in that generation didn't have the power, the space to actually go out and seek all of these, and the woman held down a powerful fort, celebrating our identities, no matter where we are, I think we wouldn't be sitting here today.
I think that's actually quite a powerful metaphor. Women representing kind of the roots, ensuring that we remain grounded, and men, the men in your life specifically, and in mine, funny enough, helping us get those branches that empowered us to actually do things in the world. So talk to me about how that identity was translated into what you do now in fashion. Why fashion? Why did you choose this as a medium of expression?
Why fashion as a medium of expression? Because I was raised in a very storytelling household. Based off a lot of historical photographs, based on a lot of historical documents, based on archives. And a lot of that involved a lot of occasions or historical occasions, involved certain high important individual visits to Palestine, pre-Nakba, even during the Ottoman and the British occupation. So it was really important to kind of preserve these. And yet again, as a person who was raised in households where our historical family households were actually placed in photographs in rooms and in salons. So like you'd walk into our house in Jordan or my grandparents' house in Jordan or wherever it is, or in Saudi, each house has the photographs of the family home back in Palestine. So it's, as a child, this is a storytelling. You create your, I want to say your Disney castle, I would say, and then your characters and what would they be dressed up as, and that's how it kind of evolved from there.
Oh my God, that's so beautiful. So really, fashion became kind of your way to paint that picture of a life that we couldn't have outside of Palestine.
Correct.
Wow, that's incredible. And especially when it comes to kind of Palestinian identity and what we're used to seeing, a lot of what we're used to seeing from a heritage perspective is rooted in the embroidery, in the tatriz. And then when we look at high fashion brands that have Arab designers, there's a lot of interpretations that have almost evolved beyond that into something that's a lot more modern. What's interesting about you is that you play in between, and it feels quite intentional. You invest time in designing headpieces. A lot of headpieces. Your headpieces appear everywhere. Your beautiful shawls that you design, pieces that feel like armor. Can you talk to us a little bit about the thinking behind why you invest so much time in pieces like this?
Okay, interestingly enough, so there's two things. My full name is Zaid Farouki. So from the name Taji, Al-Taji, it means my crown. So that's a play on my last name. And second of all, I think what defines us as a culture, and I'll remember is throughout the region is our headpieces. So even as a child, you'd find a ghatra nagal, you'd find like a loose tarbouche somewhere in the household. You'll find headpieces, a shawl, So I remember also the older generation of women who wouldn't be wearing the hijab, but as soon as they would leave the house, they would wear the isharb, which is like a silk, tiny scarf, just wrap it around. And for me, that was so beautiful. And looking back at it, it's always a definition of some sort of headpiece, whether it's a masculine or the feminine. Also, being raised in a Palestinian household, so my mom's an interior designer, and I remember these arched windows. So how our place is, we live in a multi-generational household, and our apartment is curved windows, and you have a small mastabi or windowsill, and those had all the Palestinian tatreez onto it. And so as a child, this is where you're climbing up and kind of like playing, looking down at the street. So that's something that also really sticks with me to this day. To get back at it, it's very intentional because it's part of what I saw as a child. I think the child in me somehow didn't grow up, and that's something that I hold on to. And I like to reinterpret it into my own way.
I have a question about that. A lot of your work being rooted in Palestinian narrative and heritage sometimes comes with a responsibility of representation. Does that ever feel heavy?
Yes. Because you're, is it heavy? Yes. Is it? No. Because it's my identity. It's what I'm proud of. It's who we are. But there are certain times where you look at it and it's like, I'm a designer first, and then comes as a Palestinian designer. You don't go to, I don't know, a designer would be like, oh, you're that American designer. You're a designer, you're a fashion designer. But I think we are ambassadors of some sort. And we are the vehicles of, if we can reach a certain audience, to amplify the voices that are there, that are struggling on the daily. It's not that I look at it as we're just microphones, or if we want to be of anything or use our identity, we should just amplify the voices of the people that are there. It shouldn't be more if we're utilizing our identity to a certain point, because I feel we have certain privileges that we've been granted for, although we're in the diaspora and we all have our own issues dealing with that. But I think with our identity, if we're just looking at it as being like that voice to shed light on the issues, then yeah, it's not a...
I understand where you're coming from, but if I were to spin off that a little bit, do you feel like fashion is political?
Fashion is political.
Really?
Fashion history is political. Fashion history is all about your socioeconomic standing, and super political. Fashion has always, whether it's from the caveman days, it is born out of necessity. If you need to cover certain parts, and then the stronger tribe would actually be able to hunt. So hunting would eventually lead to skin. And therefore, you'd see actually people being able to be covered. So if you're stronger or come from a stronger tribe, you'd be covered in skin rather than be covered in other materials. So it is political. It's hierarchy from the beginning.
Interesting. I wonder what that says also about fashion also being kind of like an armor. I've seen a lot of Palestinians and non-Palestinians actually wearing pieces of yours in very large kind of forums and on big stages. And I'm curious how that makes you feel, like your brand is very much associated to that.
I'm honored. So I think looking at the global sphere and how we're heading and what we're looking at, it's quite important for me to see how authentic we are to ourselves. I think there is a certain part where we want to bring in external approval, and we've forgotten our authentic selves in the process. There's nothing wrong with creating clothing that will be accepted on a global scale. But I think we in the region are missing a mark. We're missing a mark where we want to start producing these fast fashion items or appeal to a wider scale, which makes sense commercially and economically. Yet again, we have left traditional clothing where it's supposed to be with traditional tailoring, or unless someone is super specialized with creating that. And we haven't created our voice with what we wear. And that's always my question. And how do you say that? It is, for example, if you're looking at tailoring and it's something super Italian tailoring, it's evolved throughout the years. But then Italian tailoring, even up until now, men would tell you, oh, it's a sign of luxury. I only buy my suits or buy my fabrics from Italy, right? But how do we translate it to Arab? And how do we translate it to Arab garb?
It's interesting that you're saying that, because I also feel like fashion in this part of the world was very much also attributed to your surroundings. So the environment that you were in, the society you were part of, and to your point, where you sat in terms of your social standing. I guess what I find interesting about what you're saying, it also makes me think about this idea of the way we choose to see fashion today, or the way fashion is represented today by Arabs, sometimes also falls into the trap of being quite performative. Almost a gentrification of fashion. How do I say this? It's almost like people lean into obvious stereotypical references of what constitutes as Arab fashion, as opposed to evolving from that traditional wear to something a little bit more modern. So I'm curious about your thoughts for, especially in the past 2-3 years, how much has fashion evolved or been influenced by?
I think there is a lot of people that look as fashion or wanted to jump on to kind of embrace their identity, but in a very commercialized manner. And there wasn't a thought process behind, let me study the art, let me study the region, let me understand the rich history of it. So even with our cultural symbolisms, right? A lot of people don't understand where the batiha comes from. But I'll give you one of the biggest examples recently. I remember my cousin is in high school and he was working on a project and wanted to do Palestinian art. And so he called me up and he was like, hey, Zaid, since you're in that sphere, can you please tell me Palestinian artists that that I can actually shed light on? So I told him, I was like, listen, if you want, there's Masan, for example, somewhere in the UAE, there's like Hazem Harb, there's Sami Halabi, there's Sulaiman Mansour. And I remember I got called back after a couple of minutes. It's like, yeah, but none of them have like a key or a kufiya or like a dome over the rock. And I was like, okay, because it's like, that's what my teacher asked me to represent. And I was like, no, but these already are Palestinian artists. So your title, this is Palestinian art. Why are we stuck in a sphere where if we are not represented by these cultural identities, that
we're not
means
authentic enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as a Palestinian, producing any form of art is Palestinian art.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say it like that. I often say it also in storytelling, where when there's only one way that Palestinians are portrayed on film, what that tends to do is desensitize us to almost this bias that we create where a Palestinian or Palestine can only be that one thing. It is only Tatriz. It is only the Dome of the Rock. Or we are only victims of our own circumstance. We are only people that are trying to survive an occupation or living in exile. When in reality, we are so much more than that. There's so much complexity in our experience as Palestinians that have yet to be explored. It's interesting. What ended up happening? What did he end up doing?
I think following a teacher's orders or went with that direction.
Interesting.
But then again, looking at that's something that, for example, just to kind of go back into you saying how it translates into clothing, the amount of kufiya dresses or the amount of kufiya t-shirts.
Yeah.
I'm like, just...
It's a bit much.
And then you have the key, and I'm like, there's more to our culture than a t-shirt that has a key. There's more to our culture than our t-shirt that has a kufiya pattern.
But I also think that speaks to the conversations we aren't having as a collective around what it means to be Palestinian. A lot of us that are also living abroad in exile fall into the trap of hanging on to a lot of these symbols that are universally known, almost as a means of being seen in a very strange way, because khalas, people recognize them. But I think what's also important to do as Palestinians, as a community, as a collective Arab community even, is to, one, educate ourselves a lot more on history that is on the verge of, not even on the verge of, I don't want to say that because I think a lot of it is, there's a lot of investment in kind of talking about it more, but history that is trying to be erased. So we do have a responsibility. We have there's a quote that Zak Jarallah once said on this podcast: if we have a privilege to represent, we have an obligation to educate. And I love that. I think that it speaks volumes to what it means to represent and what responsibility it carries. I'm curious about the experience of working with artists. I know that, for example, Zain, you've worked with Zain in the creation of her headpiece in one of her music videos. Can you talk us through, as an experience, how a brief like that comes into your studio and what kind of creative freedom do you have to create?
Okay, so I'm lucky enough to actually have these one-on-one relationships, whether it's with the artists or their teams or their stylists. So what usually happens is I get a call or I get a message telling me, Zaid, we're doing this, and that, and this is our mood board and this is our deadline. Luckily enough, I'm given the creative freedom. Usually I am told like what they're kind of looking for, but then I'm given a creative freedom to actually create these pieces and work around it. And then honestly, a lot of time we create these pieces and you know what? We get commissioned for them. And I don't think people know that a lot of the times they don't actually make it.
Really?
Yeah.
In what way? What do you mean? They don't end up wearing it?
It ends up being like, for example, not the right color with the background in the shoot. And this is another side of fashion and another side of fashion business that we always have to discuss. Like also we saw like Bad Bunny was commissioned this Pakistani artist to create all these gloves and headpieces. I don't know if you've seen about it for
I don't know what you're
for the Super Bowl.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then eventually he didn't wear them last minute. So like you create these pieces and sometimes you do work on projects. And then, with styling, with a last minute styling or with a director, or it could be just, so even before walking in, while we're standing the lightings, I'm like, okay, are they flashing way too much, the pins? Because it can just be like, oh, it's too shiny that the camera is not picking up on it or is not focusing in. So let's take it out.
Oh, I didn't realize that last minute decisions like that are made.
100%. So a lot of the times we're creating with that and we're helping to create that. And it's always an honor to give in like that creative freedom, which is wonderful. And it's always a lot of the times we've created these pieces 6 months ago, 7 months ago, sometimes up to a year. And we have to just wait for it to launch. I remember there was a couple of music videos that were shot September 2020, 3.
Oh,
Yeah. And they didn't even launch till after the news about the so-called ceasefire a couple of months ago.
wow.
So we've worked on them, got commissioned, created these pieces. And then just depends on what happens in the world, they appear.
I know that developing kind of custom pieces is key to your business. I'm curious about the experience of working with men versus with women, in terms of what they look for when they come to you. What is the creation process like? What are some interesting things that you found? Because I will say one thing, especially when it comes to the female kind of garments that you do create, you don't follow a stereotypical or general definition of femininity in your pieces, which I actually love because they're so authentic to what Arab women used to wear, but modernized. But it doesn't fall into the trap of what Western fashion looks like. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. So whenever I actually create for women, my thought is always, how can she be the individual in the room where only the confident can actually go speak up to her? And I think that is the kind of the type of woman we design for also as well. So it's not the woman that's looking to be, I don't want to say the prettiest one in the room. She's wearing the most iconic piece, I would say. But it's always like, oh, who is she? And that's the woman I design for. And so that's always something that I like to keep at the back of my mind whenever I'm designing for females. And when it comes to men, I actually always love playing with the idea of how can we blend an aspect or still keep a very polished look, yet again add details that I've actually borrowed from actually studying both menswear and women's wear, how I can interpret them and introduce them into menswear. So in a sense of how can we make you feel like $1 million in that suit that we've created for you, mainly because the majority of our menswear is actually suit making, and make you feel that the ratios and proportions are correct. And most importantly for both genders, that you're wearing the outfit, not the outfit wearing you. So not overpowering it with accessories. Yet again, we do use a lot of accessories. If you realize, we really focus on a lot of accessories because traditionally accessories is part of our daily garb. So it's always those different aspects where we're actually tailoring and creating these pieces for you that you do look different, but in a very elegant, polished manner. Not, I would say, vulgar beauty. I wouldn't say very subtle. No, it's very maximalist. But yet again, it is showing your presence and your power within that room that you're walking into.
So the statement is intentional.
It is.
What's interesting, though, is that I find with a lot of your suits that were designed for men, there's beautiful draping in the way that you've suited for men, which is not something we see a lot in male fashion. I'm talking about when they do suits. Suits are usually a lot more fitted, and the art is about kind of the fit and the lines. While with you, there's a lot of usage of fabric. You have sashes, you have wider pants, and I'm wondering, what are you trying to say? Where does that influence come from? Is it an influence? Is it drawing on those feminine kind of characteristics?
No, not necessarily. It's actually drawing from historical garb traditionally worn by men.
Really?
Yeah. So sashes, etc., they're found in, for example, Ottoman era clothing. Wide-leg pants, but men wore them throughout the region in the 70s, in the 20s, and the 30s. It's not something that we've borrowed out of context. It's actually all historical garb or available or you'll find portraits of these men wearing these similar pieces.
Yeah, that's true. I can actually also, the sherwal, there's a lot of influence from that, I would assume.
Correct.
Interesting. Do you feel like, because you design for women and you do a lot of custom pieces, do you feel like you're interpreting femininity or collaborating with it?
Collaborating with femininity. Because what makes the woman, for me, what makes the woman feminine is her power. And I think when I'm collaborating with it, and then don't forget there is also the masculine feminine play into, I'm a male designing for a woman. And it's completely different when a woman designs for a woman and when a male designs for a woman, and vice versa, right?
Correct.
So,
but talk to me about that experience. What kind of value do you think is added? Like what changes in your lens
when I'm creating for a woman? What changes in my lens is also seeing how, what her aesthetic is, what her body proportions are, what we're willing to achieve. Yet again, all the details and the additions of embellishments yet make her feel the most confident in a room. So for me, most likely, before anything, I would likely suggest, if someone was like, oh, I really want to look, for example, powerful in this room, I'd be like, okay, we're making a suit. And they'd be like, really? And I'd be like, yeah. So we've done suitings, we've done pieces that are detachable, we've done embroidery work where it's all connected onto the back, where with your necklace, or we look at embroidery history of the woman and hand embroider the whole entire piece onto it. For me, it's collaborative of understanding who is she and what is she gonna wear for that specific event and what that moment. And you can't overpower her because there's so many times where a woman can actually be, the piece that she's wearing is wearing her and she's not wearing the piece. So it is like a tango or a dance between that.
I like that. But you know what's interesting? And I referred to this a few times in this conversation as clothing, or the embellishments that you referred to, almost being like an armor. Because what I find interesting about your work is it's layered, quite literally. And usually power, the way that it's interpreted, it's about removing things. So it's showing a lot of skin. It's that play between what I'm wearing and how much of my skin is actually showing. But with you and your pieces, it's the complete opposite because people are covered in a way that is, again, strong, iconic, symbolic. It's a statement. Do you do that consciously?
I don't think I do that consciously. But I think that comes from me being raised in the region. I think there is something to be said, not from... I don't want to say from a religious or a modest viewpoint, but I think there's always confidence more by a woman where she knows like I'm comfortable if I move this way, I'm not showing specific skin from this side. If I move that way or if it's short from this area, the way that I get up, I need to think twice about it. And I think once you give her that comfort, the way she moves in the room completely changes. So it's you looking at her and being like, okay, I'll give you that comfort so your confidence actually increases. And it's like you don't have to think about like, oh, I need to move this way and get out of the chair when I'm wearing such a short skirt, for example, because I don't want to flash everyone. But I think once you give her all these different elements and power, and when like the dress is in place, even if she's moving, even if it has an open back, but it's connected in a way where wherever she moves, there isn't any bits and pieces that are going to show that she's moving differently.
That is such a powerful way of defining not just modest clothing, but clothing in general. Designing clothing in a way where it changes the way that she moves and making sure that she's comfortable first. I love that because it's usually the opposite. What have women taught you about strength?
Everything. I credit all the strength and the power to actually women in my family to actually teaching us that. I think strength, identity, resilience was all passed down through women mostly. And it's just part of a celebration of some sort.
What have you learned from the men in your life?
Tenacity. Recreation. Or recreating oneself. And I think to a certain extent also, no matter what happens, it's understanding how fragile you can be and how graceful you can be and how I don't know how to say it in English.
عادي قولها بالعربي.
بس how to have ما بدي أقول مشاعر بس في شوية عاطف empathy or empathy أو حنية.
You learned that from men.
Yes,
That's beautiful.
Because there is a duality that we've been raised with, you know, whatever you see at work, whatever you see at the office, whatever you see. But yet again, in households, behind doors, the amount of... Is there a word for حنية in English?
حنية, empathy. I think it's empathy. حنية, it's love. Love, empathy. They're endearing. I think that's the word.
Anyways, but so from that, yeah, because it's interesting to see how to play this duality of with men, the masculine and the feminine. I know we get a lot of backlash, I would say, about the masculine in society, but yet again, I think I've learned it of how, yes, no matter what happens outside the household, no matter what it is, they're here to provide and protect in a certain way. And that's where the softness kind of comes in. So no matter what you ask and no matter what happens, there's protection of some sort.
I love that. Usually we end our episodes with an opportunity for you to ask me a question or give me something to consider. Zaid, what would you like to ask me? What would you like me to consider?
What I would like to ask you? My question would be, would we, as Zaid, as my practice, what would you see the way that I react to our identity and to the women and men that we represent? What is an added layer that you believe that we should approach our practice with that you believe is something that you'd like to see in the future of us creating?
Great question. I think what's beautiful about the way that you not just work, but navigate life is that you're incredibly open. You're incredibly open and you're incredibly intentional about how you create. You create with a mindset of collaboration. You want to accommodate what's in front of you. And I don't mean for that to sound odd. When I say accommodate, you're listening to the person in front of you, which is brilliant. But what's interesting about you, Zaid, is that you have so much to say. You have so much to say. Even now, I feel like we didn't even get past the surface of what I know you have to say. And you have a very specific point of view on what the role of tradition should serve today in the way that it has already been framed, not in a way of changing it. And I feel like because you've established yourself in this industry, you have a real opportunity to educate people on this. And you've done it already with your pieces, but I feel like you could go even one step further. You have the potential to become هالمرجع, where you introduce us to a side of our heritage, not just as Palestinians, but as Arabs, a side of our heritage that we either forgot or haven't had the privilege of meeting yet. And I would love to see that come from you, because very similar to the pins that you do or the shawls that you do that I'm in love with, what I love about them is that they're not limited to a moment. they invite me to wear Zaid Farouki every day. So I would love for more opportunities like that. And I think you have the voice and the power to be able to do so.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Before we go, though, I do want to have a nod to your teta. Please talk to me about teta.
Okay.
The influence of teta on your life.
The influence of teta. So I was lucky enough to have met both my tetas. And so sadly, my paternal teta, passed away in 96. So we lost her quite a long time ago. But the most person that I've actually had is my maternal teta, and Teta Nawal. And I think and I actually got to actually meet and live with Teta's mother.
Wow.
So she actually passed away back in 2001.
MashaAllah.
So I actually, Teta Amina. So I actually got to see a multi-generational Teta household.
Was it in Palestine or in Jordan?
No, it was in Jordan. So
Okay.
she moved in her last days. She moved to Jordan and lived with my Teta. And it was beautiful. And I'm also lucky enough to say that there is not only my teta, but there's so many other aunties that we refer to as teta or auntie and play this role, you know, like, you know how, like, funny enough, and how we met, and how with Fridge, how you have all these tetas come around, and we have this teta come around,
the
like,
community,
the community of tetas, and they're all related. We're all related, and they come together. And I think it's for them. It's our identity held within us, like everything from, you know, even the subtle gestures. How to make sure that someone is fed, how to check up on someone, how to text someone, how to lift up the phone and just ask about people all throughout the day. I think also it's how to act in front of guests. And I remember my teta up until now is that we were just teenagers, me, my brother, and my cousin, who were all similar in age. And she told us as soon as we were teenagers, she's like, a woman looks at a man in two things when she first meets him: his watch and his shoe.
Is that a fact?
That's according to Teta.
Okay.
So, like,
if it's according to Teta, it must be true.
It must be true. So by the way, it is the funniest thing. So all three of us cousins are actually obsessed with shoes and obsessed with watches.
Really?
Yeah. So it is actually quite interesting to kind of see that relationship and see how it evolves and the tenderness of it all, right? And how her relationship, not only is it to her children and grandkids, but relationship to the extended family with her daughter and son-in-laws, with their families, and how inclusive she is with everyone. And I think that's a lesson to be taught. Not only that, we know a lot of the history, a lot of our relationship to our homeland, to our food, to even the seasonality of foods, or doing the olive pressing, or doing all of that. It all happened in our grandparents' houses.
Yeah. They have this way of being the glue metaphorically and literally to our households. Tetas are very, very important.
Yeah, and I don't think we would relate or be who we are with our identity if it wasn't for our grandmothers really holding on to it and passing down that heritage.
I agree.
I think what was a very interesting exhibition was the one that I mentioned before in Beirut, where whenever Israel bombed Lebanon, the Athar would actually show because how hard the collision would be from the rocket. It would actually show historical sites that were uncovered before, further proving this whole region's historical presence.
Wow.
So I think that was so darkly metaphoric in a sense where because how hard the impact would be is that it would uncover historical findings of how inhabited and how long this region has been inhabited.
That is such a powerful metaphor, and I need to see this exhibit. So basically, the harder we are hit, the more we reveal the truth, which we've always known to be true, which is we're here, we've always been here, and yeah, we will continue to tell our stories.
Yeah, our stories are always, and there's one way that I would actually think about it, and it's something that I learned from people, is that you always need to believe that we've already been liberated, whether it's on the ground or not happening, that we've already achieved liberation in our heads and in our minds, and in a sense that we are going back, that we are fully liberated.
Inshallah.
And just looking at it, and even looking at it at a certain point of time, historically speaking, my personal family experience, we can trace back our family history to hundreds, if not more than thousands of years in the region, whether it is to do with blood Sham or the Gulf region or even into Turkish blood. So we are from this region. And if you were to look at it, and there was something that struck me the other day, if we were to look at occupation as a timeline, I'm almost 35. I turned 35 this year. And it's actually weird enough to say that I've lived almost half the time the occupation was there.
Yeah.
So if you were to look at it in that way, we're just a small little tot in that timeline of thousands of years of history this region has gone through.
And survived.
So at the end of the day, we are going to inherit the region. Our people are the people from the region will eventually live again and tell our stories one day.
We're all headed back home. Well, thank you. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having me.
Did you enjoy this conversation?
I had a wonderful time.
Okay, good. Alhamdulillah. I hope you'll join us again on another day, in another time, hopefully in Palestine.
Inshallah, ya Rab.
Inshallah, ya Rab. Thank you. And to all of you listening, as always, I want to thank you for the privilege of your time. I hope you found something to consider.